East London man Christopher Erunse was a known GUN man. He was dangerous, highly volatile, and had a massive ego that often got himself into tough situations. However, the London man was known to carry a pistol. The pistol was also used to protect his drug operation and also to keep his rivals, robbers, and other gangsters at bay. On September 26, 2015, a then 28-year-old Chrstophers' life was put on notice by people that he had grew up with, that he once called his very good friends, and that being 25-year-old Moses Fadairo and his older brother Emmanuel, over a drug dispute. Now, rumours suggest that Christopher had taken Class A off the Fadairo brothers, but did not pay for it, and he also made light of the situation with regards for paying his debt. Effectively, the brothers believed that Christopher had stolen their stash. Of course, the two dealers and once friends had gone back and forth over video calls, messages, and also through friends and associates. There was no attempt to sit down and try to hash out their problems or their issues, pay back the debt, or offer a payment plan, or put friendship before profits. Ego played a major part, and both men were considered bosses in their own rights and did not want to look small. So Moses allegedly let Christopher know, "When I see you, it's on sight." Christopher acted the same way in response. Now, in the lead up to the M, reports say that Moses and his brother Emmanuel had circled the area constantly of Hackney, where it was said that Christopher made most of his sales. Now, during the first few trips, Moses and Emmanuel had missed Christopher by an hour or two because Christopher would have moved on to Lower Clapton or Hackney. Now, peed off, angry, hell-bent on confronting his rival, Moses Fadairo, his brother Emmanuel, and another man had once again called a taxi and then went to Chatsworth Road in order to hunt down Christopher. One way or another, they were going to get him today. Now, outside the Mighty Meat Butcher's shop, Christopher and Moses were seen by witnesses arguing. Effectively, Moses, Emmanuel, and the third man had ran out of the taxi after spotting Christopher right by the butcher's shop on Chatsworth Road. They ran up to Christopher and then began to argue. Now, the argument was animated, with both men talking with their hands and gesturing to each other and getting real close to each other as well as they began to shout back and forth. The confrontation then went up a notch when Moses pulled out his blade and then pressed it into the back of the leg of Christopher. Now, in response, Christopher, who had been with a friend, 28-year-old Bradley Winter, pulled out his pistol. Now, at the sight of the elongated barrel, Moses, Emmanuel, and a third person had scattered in all which directions. Now, Christopher pressed the trigger at least 2 times, while his rival ran for their life. This incident occurred at 1 p.m. Let that sink in, 1 p.m. So Christopher pulled out his GUN in front of pedestrians that had immediately ran as well and also darted for the ground, and shoppers on a packed high street and in broad daylight. And then Christopher fired, not caring whom the AM struck. Now, Moses was struck once in the chest, which tore through the heart as he ducked further AM. Now, he was caught on CCTV taking refuge in the Mighty Meat Butchers. Red was leaking profusely, and Moses' last thoughts were probably, why did he go in a taxi and look for trouble when he was a new father of twins? Was it worth it? And also probably figured to himself, please don't let me die. Now, tragically, by the time London Ambulance Service, the paramedics, the trauma team, and the police arrived at the scene, Moses was already in a bad way, and his injuries were classed as catastrophic, and sadly, the new dad was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, in the aftermath of Bradley, who was in Percy Ingles Baker at the time, had taken the GUN of Christopher. He actually wrapped it in his jacket with the intention of hiding it or getting rid of it. However, in his panic state, Bradley was caught on CCTV dropping the pistol on the street. Nerves and adrenaline obviously getting the better of him. Now, when police investigated the M, they found out that Christopher Erunse had grown up with both Moses and Emmanuel Fadairo in Hackney, Pembury Estate. They were once upon a time considered very good friends, They hung around each other, grew up together, knew each other's mums, dads, and family members, and actually sat down and ate at each other's house around the dinner table, shared jokes and also problems. However, tensions turned sour and the friendship was broken when the Fadairo brothers Dre went missing and the finger was pointed squarely at Christopher. The debt was then attached to his name and Christopher was ordered to pay it back, or there would be dire consequences. Because Moses and Emmanuel were considered the Fadairo brothers and were considered as very bad gangsters and more dangerous than Christopher because they had the backup of each other, the last thing that the brothers expected was for Christopher to get himself a pistol, load it, and then retaliate after being bladed by literally killing a person that he classed as a friend, a good friend. The end result was Moses had been struck with which ended up tearing through the heart, while his brother fled the scene unscathed. Now, in the aftermath of the Christopher knew it was only a matter of time before he would be arrested by police and also charged. Think about it. He acted in such a despicable way in front of witnesses that actually seen his face and also seen him pull the gun out and press the trigger. There was also CCTV. So, Christopher went home, packed a bag, withdrew money from the bank, gathered his passport, and booked a flight to Amsterdam. Now, in an attempt to create some distance, Christopher arranged to fly from Birmingham Airport, and just 3 days after the incident, Christopher was actually sitting on a plane at Birmingham Airport, waiting for the plane to depart the runway, when police entered the plane and then went straight for Christopher and arrested him for the of his friend Moses. Now, Christopher was heard on the phone at the time telling his mate he had just been napped before he was handcuffed. Now, when police took Christopher back to the police station, the then 28-year-old answered no comment to all questions, but it didn't matter because the police had already built a solid case against him. They established a connection between Christopher and Moses and Emmanuel, and the reason for their fallout, as both men were known as dealers in the London area, and of course they had both served long prison sentences. Police also had Bradley Winter implicated in the crime when CCTV proved that the pistol was linked to Christopher after it had been dropped when it was moved from the scene, and of course, over a dozen witnesses came forward to explain the set of events. That would include a taxi driver that actually dropped off Moses and Emmanuel to Chatsworth Road in Hackney. And when Bradley Winter was arrested, he actually told police officers that he had in fact been in possession of the pistol, but then he had chucked it away. It was now somewhere in the Thames River. And when Christopher was going through the month-long trial, he did admit to having a pistol, but denied the attempted and also manslaughter. However, ultimately, Christopher was found guilty of manslaughter and being in possession of a pistol. He was not found guilty of the Now, it was accepted that Christopher may have acted in self-defense to agree after being bladed in the back of the leg. However, the judge reprimanded Christopher by saying the impact of Christopher's actions was huge and the damage irreparable. They continued, saying that a young man of 24 years old had lost his life. His children, the twins, are now fatherless. I am told that his mother has been left inconsolable and unable to come to terms with what happened, and his siblings, who led law-abiding lives, are left bereft. It was Christopher who chose to live in a world of drug and also being a gangster, where it was clear numbers of your friends and associates have been bladed or unfortunately lost their lives due to being struck with ammo, so he knew the consequences of his actions. It was you who, out of greed and money, even after a number of long prison sentences, always returned to this type of world and this occupation. You feared for your life and did not seek help from the police, as you should have done in a lawful society, but instead chose to load yourself with a gun and go into a high street at the busiest time of the day, at the busiest time of the week. It's frankly a miracle that no passerby or innocent civilian was injured. Now, Christopher was jailed for life with a minimum term of 18 years, and his mate Bradley Winter was jailed for 5 years for being in possession of a pistol. Again, both men have experience with jail time, so they know what to expect. Condolences. But this is a true reality of what happens when you deal drug and also a gangster and you have rivals. Stay safe.